Gillian Wearing was born in Birmingham, England in 1963. She happened into art by chance while working for an animation firm where they encouraged her to apply to art school. She is now an admired artist working with video, photography, and sculpture. Wearing was influenced by the documentary movies that she watched as a child, including the Up series and The Family. The Up series is a documentary film that follows the lives of 14 British children since they were 7 years old, spanning the course of 49 years. Topping the list of the 50 greatest documentaries, the series checks in with the participants every 7 years. Children were selected to represent a range of socioeconomic backgrounds in Britain at the time, with the assumption that a child's social class predetermines their future. Some of the motifs in the series include questions about religion, family, class, happiness, psychological state, and worries about the future. Although the series began as a political documentary, it has transformed into a film about human nature and existentialism, something the director says he didn't even realize until the third series, 21 Up. It is easy to see how these documentaries have inspired and influenced the work of Gillian Wearing. In an interview, Wearing stated, "Being an artist, I have to go through life accepting certain situations and making a lot of compromises. I'm attracted to all sorts of people, average as well as extreme. But above all, I really love people who go through life without compromise and stick to their character, even when it means they remain unemployed or they don't have any friends or relationships. In a world which is willing to be elastic, they stick resolutely to this one path, this fixed belief in themselves. We all have a certain madness about us, and these people don't mind showing it, which leads me to believe that the most insane thing you can ever try and do is be sane." I think this speaks a lot to Gillian Wearing's work. She records and documents these people that stick to their guns, but she also captures those that don't. She uncovers the inner secrets of those people that may not feel comfortable being completely true to themselves, those that don't have that steadfast commitment to who they are and what they stand for. Of course, everyone in life has their secrets, but what those are may be surprising. What compromises has someone made in life? It's an admirable trait and skill to be able to have such a trusting relationship with our subjects that they can trust a stranger with their secrets that a close friend or family member may not even know. I think Waring's project Dancing in Peckham is a great example of what she means by someone that doesn't compromise, because in this video you see this woman dancing in the middle of what I think is a mall, and this is someone doing what they want, what they believe in, and something that may not be considered normal, but they're still there and they're still going for it. And I think this is the type of person that Wearing is attracted to and finds intriguing. And I think that this piece of her statement is really evident in her work. Ben Judd commented on Wearing's work. "Imaginary space is quite close to individual space, and they both encompass the notion that although everyone may be together in a public space, we're essentially alone and separate, caught up in our own worlds." In her work, this idea is accentuated by her asking people to do very absorbing private acts in public. It maybe only works in a city. I think this is extremely telling of Wearing's work with signs. She credits the Signs Project as her breakthrough, and admittedly, it is also what drew me to her. I think it's an intriguing body of work where she asks strangers on the street to write down one of their inner thoughts and takes a picture of them holding this white sheet of paper with whatever they've written on it. And they are confined to this one piece of paper, but they can do whatever they want with it. And I think that's quite symbolic of life, and maybe that's what she was going for. This speaks to the compromises she talked about previously as well. You can only show so much on this one piece of paper, and you can also only show so much of who you are as a person in life. and you have to choose what that's going to be, and you want to see whether or not someone's going to compromise. After experimenting with street photography and knowing what it means to have an awkward relationship with a stranger as a subject, I really can admire Waring's work. When even techniques like shooting from the hip seem difficult, uncomfortable, and awkward, Waring finds a way to get these strangers to not only pose for her photographs, but to also pair their face with a secret, a confession, or an inner thought. And I could only imagine the air of magnetism around her that could inspire such a relationship between photographer and subject. This is another quote from Waring that comments on people sharing information in her work and shed some light on the dynamic of that relationship. And even though it was part of her Masks Confession project, I think it's still relevant to her work with signs. I decided that I wanted people to feel protected when they talked about certain things in their life that they wouldn't want the public that knows them to know. I can understand that sort of holding on to things. It's kind of a part of British society to hold on to things. I always think of Britain as being a place where you're meant to keep your secrets. You should never tell your neighbor or tell anyone. Things are changing now because the culture's changed and the internet has brought people out. We have Facebook and Twitter where people tell you small details of their life. While most of these signs are images from before Facebook and Twitter existed, I think it's an important point to bring up. People often portray their lives and these perfect lives on social media. And if you take away the signs in Waring's images, that's kind of what you have. You have this image of what someone looks like or what they appear to be, but then you bring the truth into it, which is what the sign does. And I think the strongest example of this is the businessman holding the desperate sign. And this is one of her most talked about photos. Outwardly, he looks like this composed man, and you can easily draw many assumptions about his personal life and his success based on his dress. But in reality, his inner truths and inner thoughts reveal something quite different. And that's what the sign shows, and that's what Waring's work is really all about. Even just by looking at this image, you can take away a lot and ask a lot of questions. I imagine that this is a post-sex picture. There is a given intimacy looking at it. These are two people nearly naked in a bed together, or maybe it's a pull-out couch. It's kind of hard to tell if the back is a couch or a headboard. And I think there's also multiple sources of tension in this image. The body language is really interesting, and the man is very rigid and almost seems scared. And there's just something about the position of his arms that bring a lot of feeling into this. And the woman has her back turned. She has her back turned to him, and it looks like she's angry and that it's a couple that got in a fight, but they still need to share the same bed at night. And you kind of wonder, why is she the only one with a blanket on? I think it's really interesting looking at their eyes. Looking at their eyes, you can see that they're kind of looking off into a similar direction. And I just wonder if they're looking at the same thing or if it's symbolic of some kind of avoidance in their relationship. And I think that the fact that they are looking off into a different direction makes this image seem more candid and real. But it's also important to remember the presence of the photographer. And although it isn't a first-person perspective, that realization kind of brings a sense of intrusion to the image. The photograph is from the series A Woman Called Teresa. And in the series, she's posed with several different men, and each image includes the men's commentary on their relationship. And I think these commentaries really help bring context to the image. This particular one opens with, "For my point of view, she is absolutely stupid." It is interesting that he would make such a comment when he's using the wrong word, and the rest of the letter is written with similar spelling and grammatical errors. The condescending tone sheds light on aspects of their relationship, and it makes you wonder what the effect has on this woman. And maybe she is angry in this picture, but she could also be hurt by his words and the way he treats her. He explains how she has sexual relations with other men, but also says that he asked her to marry him. He says that she has sold herself for a can of beer, which shows where she's at in her life and maybe where her confidence level may be. Or maybe, as he said in the beginning, she's just stupid. I think the writing helps give a sense of who they are as people, but it's not completely clear whether or not this is a faithful source of that character judgment. As the politics of gender, sexuality, ethnicity, and other important aspects of identity developed, it inspired philosophical considerations of works of art, who was being depicted and by whom. This led to a presentation of a more diverse range of cultural perspectives. The ethnographic turn is a method of collecting and presenting work based on observation of human society and culture, and it often takes the form of documentary photography or video, which may be paired with explanatory text or narrative. Gillian Wearing emerged during a favorable time in contemporary art when this ethnographic work was being developed and supported. She deals with the relationship between public and private, so all issues and images that she creates speak to the current times when the photos were taken. And she creates this interesting relationship between viewer and subject in all of her projects. And I think a good example of this is her project 60 Minutes of Silence, where the police force is standing or sitting there in silence for 60 minutes. And normally this police force is this powerful and feared establishment, but by just standing there, they are stripped from this power and are kind of just facing the subject. And it creates this new and interesting relationship between the subject and what they think of the police force. And you're kind of with them, against them at the same time, because you know what they do, but you also just see that they're people. And I think this is a reoccurring theme in Wearing's work. And I also think that's what makes it so captivating. Whether it be a real or fictional documentary, her work makes a statement, and it is inspiring to artists of all different mediums.